Shirley here with Sirius Tellus Moon. This is Mercury Hour, Mars Day. Mercury is retrograde 23 degrees Cancer. And we have Venus Ketu out of sign conjunction. A lot of Saturn ruling the midheaven, ascendant applying to Saturn. Moon separating from Saturn, opening the synodic cycle. And the overall energy. Mercury's messages about relation, and what I'm getting Saturn Mars is relations between commanders and the lower ranks. Venus was crossing Mars of Israel, and we may be scheduled to, with Neptune retrograde, more fiascos. I remember there was a network of human trafficking within the IDF. Ronnie Sadovnikolony, Royal Ronnie Sadovnikolony talked about it a couple of years ago, and the fact that the social media is not accessible to read for the people that were part of sharing the atrocities, the juristic documentation, and still reliant on portraying, how should I say that, portraying the feminine, which is both male soldiers, women soldiers, LGBTQ soldiers, people at lower rank, people are not even soldiers, and people at higher rank that are also women. Within the lines of the army, within the lines of intelligence, is still reliant on portraying the feminine, which is people that went through torture, molestation, abuse, using dark occult, using weird technology as, how should I say that, this ego bravado, compounding incompetence, is probably about to leak, and this is something that can end up being another chapter in a lineage of fiascos. Ketu Magha doesn't allow for leeway when it comes to ego tripping, power tripping, okay, think about the Epstein dossiers and the situation of a person who could have been the father of someone, talking about the character of the person at the lower rank, showing a pedophilic dishonoring of the feminine. Rather than, let's say, having an argument that discusses a structural or a thought fallacy, and the ways that it can be corrected, withstanding the ability to be refuted. Again, calling to declassify classify technologies and mentioning a structure. So there's the ability to be refuted, and then there is the ability to understand the structure. What in medicine we call science-based medicine. And when we take esoterics into account, we're talking about declassification. Now, more things that show up on this opening lunar cycle with Moon Saturn. Mars in Gemini. Mars in Gemini is quick and mutable, but here is another thing. There's a certain culture, the Magha culture, okay, the Epstein to Seer culture, is what's going through that Ketuin. Now, since Aquarius and Leo are fixed signs, they're on the fixed axis, we see the challenge in letting go of those trajectories. Even though everybody knows that they're not relevant to today, they're not up to speed, and the nostalgia too looks more and more fiasco compounding. Okay, we think about Neptune retrograde, think about the time where Israel thought that the French were Palestinian, and what the veil of ignorance showed. Um, I don't know about the fiasco in Syria earlier yesterday. Um, and another thing is that the role of psychologists, there's the esoteric and occult, and then there's the role of psychologists with Pluto, because people are gonna question the psychological warfare. Think MK Ultra was held accountable, and I said that 2025 to somewhat 2026 is gonna look a little bit like 1995, and that was borne out. Another thing that we see is the psychological warfare. There's the occultistic warfare, and there's the psychological warfare, and there's the human trafficking within the intelligence and the IDF, and the role of psychology that should have been stopping that, but was Epstein infiltrated. Okay, the autopilot smugness fixed crescendo of collisions into epic fail armies is probably happening as we speak. I just think about the time where NATO had to escort a plane, an Israeli plane that went into weird territories right after the disaster where an Italian safekeeping force was shut down. and whatever was the disaster with that ship, with that French ship. And it looks like people concentrated on trying to dishonor the feminine while they're fiascoing after fiascoing. Actual standing the test of time, sovereignty, cornerstone to human rights, are not something that ego games can create and or sustain. Um, the culture of sexual harassment, trafficking both to women commanders or to men commanders happening within the IDF with the interface of psychologists is something that I strongly receive and I don't usually channel, but this is so, it's kind of like something, an omen comes up on the line of communication so profoundly calling itself to be exposed. Crimes against humanity committed by people that were egoically holding on to futile paradigms, failing to integrate feministic um, national and international security standards. Smear campaigning, patience. Just think about the situation. A soldier in a mandatory army recruitment doesn't feel so well or has a crisis, runs into a list of bureaucracies. One day that soldier takes their weapon and shoots everyone around. Where was the, what they call it, mashakitash, makit, somebody that was supposed to, where was the psychologist? Where were the people that were supposed to prevent? Now think about a genocide. I was receiving strong omens of sexual boundary violation between level called Makit. Makit is basically commander of division and the soldiers, or people are not even soldiers. And it was something that was coming so strong on the line that I just couldn't ignore it. It's like It's almost like a leak wishing itself to be exposed. Now, I never served in the army. I'm not compatible to the. I'm not compatible to big organized anything, including organized crime. And in general, every place. I have Uranus in my 10th house. So somebody was either trying to reach my 10th house, or there was an issue about reputation. Now, I have Neptune midheaven, so reputation when with Uranus is kind of something that I'm just radically accepting that I don't control how people see me. But trying to contact my 10th house exposes Neptune is leaking and Uranus is revolution. So somebody either from intelligence or psychology or a secret society or military rank was trying to communicate or contact or create something or to around my 10th house, and it's compounding to me receiving strong omens that I just described. That's what I'll just receive, those channelings that I never asked for. I wasn't trying to tune into, or it can be a NATO interface now that there's the summit. And it has to do with use of technology or hidden tech in sexual boundary violation outside the lines of military. There's something is completely inconsistent with anything. How should I say that? It's something that compounds to like an extortion web of interests that was trying to target people that are not affiliated, and then wonder why everything is compounding to everything leaking in those areas. Let's just say Uranus in the 10th house people, people where, let's say if I try to work at a corporation, it would expose all the corruption in the corporation. Now, what if a corporation tries to contact me? Same thing, it's just I did not even apply. Um, Another thing is completely different trajectory. But I was talking about the people that are already there, the people that are already aligned, and the people that are already aligned are able to see through a lot of the things that the people that are misaligned are not discerning of. Now, people that have Neptune midheaven, Neptune 10th house. My parent has a Neptune 10th house. I have a Neptune midheaven at a sign conjunction. There can be, like, if there is a reputational fiasco, it might expose a hidden blessing. Or if there was a reputation fiasco, it might show who are the people that, or where were people collapsing. Let's say um, Neptune is eroticism. So it might expose, for example, oh, who are the people that didn't see through certain things? It's like, oh, that's interesting. That's good to know. It's definitely not an environment that I want to be around. And again, it's not about judgment. Okay, it goes back to what I'm saying about the people that are tending to stuff that like anywhere near what I'm tending to, their counterpart has to be a person who's already there. This is not that, how should I say that? Not somebody that in themselves are also growing, because both of them are going to need counterparts that are already there. It's kind of like if we are growing each in their own trajectory, grow it, breaking glass ceilings that are unprecedented, not just in modern times but also in historical times. And then of course it prompts the question: what person would already be there? And I leave it as an open-ended thing. Um, and there can be a lot of inner collapses. It's, Ketu through Magha, a little bit of grace for Ketu through Magha, because it's going through this existential crisis that is overwhelming. And Jupiter, ruling of Rahu, is about to oppose Pluto, which means that also the where we're going is going through an existential crisis and rejuvenation, or a crisis of beliefs. And I'm just going to let Jupiter, and not only that, Jupiter is going to oppose Pluto in what's called the Barbault's basket, which is this thing that no living astrologer has lived through, which is a double bisextile of the outer planets and Jupiter opposing Pluto. I'm not going to even attempt at delineating the coming weeks, which also is a context to the NATO summit. I just read the briefs, another reiteration of Greenland. Um, Again, Pluto retrograde, Neptune retrograde. I think the Pluto retrograde is probably the the trigger, which in Trump's chart would be the seventh house. And it's another thing that could polarize when we talk about NATO chart. compounding stress, um, and there, how should I say that? Let's just say the alliance has to deal with a certain shadow or wound around what was swept under the rug regarding the feminine and the entire alliance. I think a little bit of the, to be very honest, the Trump Meloni thing looked like a Trump stand to be agent provocateur and promote the conference, but it also applies to this Chiron in the ninth house with Venus in the eighth, the swiped under the rug tensions of the feminine, and even bringing to question, as Meloni fairly addressed, do we accept that as even from a marketing setting, even from a no bad publicity setting, do we accept that as and I think stuff along that line are going to come up, um, and of course we should also take into account all the things that I talked about, whether it's technologies or esoterics, points of interferences in the system, the big polarization, Uranus Gemini, Mars Gemini is, yes, it's a difficult transit. The decisive, quick, assertive nature of Mars in the premature, playful, not yet knowing good and bad sign of Gemini. Now you say, but Chile is the 10th house of NATO. I don't make the rules, folks. That's the chart. I'm reading the chart. um, and again, also the Taurus Scorpio is a fixed axis. So methods or strategies that were fixed, running 12 o'clock from Chiron. A lot of the people have still the Segna at the end of Aries, beginning of Taurus, so it's going to affect the people in the conference, the military milieu, at a profound level. Are we going to have a NATO fiasco similar to the IDF fiasco? I would prepare for that possibility. Okay, do I see something like that coming up at the chart? Not necessarily in transits, because it's a lot of 8th house stuff, which is usually less visible, and Mars is in the 8th house. But Mars right now is transiting the 10th. I think the main issues have already been addressed and discussed the 3.5 to 5, and then Greenland and the Swedes and the Americans, and then Ukraine wanting to be a part of NATO while single-handedly ruining oil infrastructure in Russia using American weapons. Okay, there's a lot. Mars, Uranus have Mars, Uranus. Um, this is why when I was shown that the person is going to be the composer over this orchestra, is a person that has or that was the composer over an orchestra for 14 years. That was not that it was quick. That was quite that had the potential to be quite squeaky. And I said, yeah, it makes sense. Like just imagine Trump was the Secretary General. I know that he opened a competing alliance. um, and then of course I'm gonna be called out for saying any names without saying the Sears. Um, to which my reply is the Ketu Maga is Ketu Magain, and the compounding issues regarding honoring the feminine are issues that are gonna have to be tackled and tended to, whichever the how should I say that, the structure of the team, or whoever is on the team, that theme is is scheduled to be tended to. And I think a good setup was not set up in a bad way, but priming was the UN Security Council 1325. Um, now, um, people are gonna pay close attention. Okay, I remember when the summit was in The Hague, there was a lot of discussion about things that in the past, just a decade and a half ago, were overlooked, and people begged the question. Okay, now from the concrete study case to the general study case, people look in every such conference. People look at the parties and the after parties and the dinners and what do people do outside the conference. Just like we look at, oh, that was a weird thing that happened in Syria prior to Macron arriving to Ankara. People also look at the things outside, and this is where addressing, okay, we can call it the sausage moment. So addressing the sausage moment and the issues around nervous system hacking and the issues around those cultures that a person doesn't have the say or doesn't have the agency within, can be a good point of interference. Another thing that comes up again regarding the Israeli interface, a lot of the rape culture around Israel is no longer seen as a part of the militant jargon, particularly when it involves non-military people or civilians, but even not particularly. Okay, we talk about mandatory service. Um, a lot of I think that we're going to see the not the equivalent, but things that are something like a second chapters on the horse that were seen on the French boat are going to be leaking, let's say. And it kind of looks like, well, instead of tackling the things to treat the corruption along the lines before Israel is called out on, people are busy trying to portray even relatively, how should I say that? People are busy trying to portray the people that were harmed, civilians, and not within the lines of and outside the lines of those organizations, but coming from the abuse coming from within those lines of organizations within Israel, completely playing into the hands of everybody that wants to take Israel down. And I'm just thinking that that's kind of a weird behavior. It only gives a card to external. It only shows, let's say, if let's just say if an intelligence or not intelligence, if let's say um, competing esoterics in even an ally country like United States looks at it and see what's happening within Israel, it looks weird. Shout out to Needing Cult Lady. It looks like probably somewhere out there was a Needing Cult Lady in Hebrew that was completely ignored. Structure-wise, that's how, talking about the Israeli milieu right now, structure-wise, that's how it looks. All the while, NATO literally peacefully escorted an Israeli plane that wasn't supposed to be anywhere near where it was. I know there was another case where Israel was not letting a plane land that's said to have been hijacked, which is the emergency where the plane must land securely and in an okay. You know that how should I say that? You know that I job NATO and I job NATO. but it's also an interface Think about the Department for Politics and Governance, from which a lot of the people come to those milieus in universities like Ben Gurion University, Jerusalem University, Haifa University, all compacted and condensed with Epstein cult-like human trafficking network within the departments. Jupiter rules academic studies. The applying opposition to Pluto um, I just think about the fact that the day prior to Benjamin Netanyahu announcing to the people that there is war on 7th of October, he made the first call to a person that just by chance is now the Secretary General of NATO, is Mark Rutte. In what position does it put Mark Rutte? And how much of that fiasco could have been prevented for the then caretaking Prime Minister of Netherlands had the compounding effect of the academic infiltration systems not being, how should I say that, so busy silencing any possible person that goes against conformed notions. And and by the way, there was he was facing two major events right prior to the ingress to NATO. Now, for sure, when there is something like the Security Council 1325, there probably going to be an attempt to make it backfire for the Secretary General for putting that clause out there, which is where declassification of technologies and the right of the public to know when it comes to anything that could have interfered, whether it's things that happen in the unofficial events, any substances that could have been non-volitionally, okay? Any esoterics that could have been affecting any tech, And um, now, I think what I've been discussing in my channel over and over again has portrayed the entirety of the scientific arguments that are relevant to the epistemics of jurisdiction process. And I think it's fair enough to say that this episode I will release today, and we're going to call it the Twin Drops.